Hi everyone, and welcome to Casual Watch Talk Sunday Social. Sorry I missed last week. We had a bit of a friends gathering here, so thank you for everyone that stuck with us back this week. We should have a pretty good run of these coming up. But anyway, so we're joined by a panel today. Thomas has joined us. Thanks, Thomas, for joining us. Todd, thanks for joining us, and we're joined by Sarah. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. Thank you.
Well, let's kick it off with the wristwatch check, shall we? Thomas, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I thought sticking with the revival theme, I'd wear my A384, my Zenith A384 revival. Okay, so I love revival watches. I'm a big fan of them. There's been so many out there in the past few years, and this is one of my favorites. So the Zenith A384 revival. It was 1969. It was re-released in 1919 for the 50th anniversary of the El Primero movement. This was the first watch that the El Primero movement was in, and yeah, absolutely love it. It's a great little panda chronograph.
Awesome. So that come up on our subject today.
Yep.
Cool. Sarah, do you want to go next with a wristwatch check, but also do you want to do a quick intro as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm Sarah Ferguson. I work for Bonhams, the auction house. So I'm a watch specialist for them. I cover Scotland and Northern England. And I'm also good friends with Ricky and Dave. So I've done a bit of co-hosting with them on Scottish watches. And I've written a few things for Oracle Time as well. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome.
Great.
What watch are you wearing?
And I've got on, I get made fun of for wearing this so much, but it's my Black Bay 58, 95.
Oh, the 95.
Silver one.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love
Silver,
it.
nice.
Yeah.
Has it patinaed at all?
It has, and I don't mind it at all. To be honest, I thought it would look vastly different, and maybe just because it's been gradual, I haven't noticed it. But I definitely see around the edges of the lugs where they join the case, there's something there. But it's not offensive in any way to me. Yeah. And I assumed it was going to do that because that was part of what kind of drew me to it was I love vintage things, and silver seemed like quite an unusual material to put a modern watch in. Mm-hmm. And so I was kind of keen to see what happened to it. So no, I think it still looks great. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it looks great on that NATO.
Yeah.
It does.
Todd, you're up next. What are you wearing?
I'm up next. So you saw me reach behind me because I've got several of my watches with me today. And since Thomas opened up with that, here is one of the originals. This is the Movado Zenith.
Lovely.
Try to get it up here. Try again. Here we go. The Movado Zenith. There we go. Kind of getting it. This is a moon phase triple date with the El Primero movement in it.
Right.
1970, and it's got the original. It's got a the cool thing is, if I can show the clasp, it's a Zenith clasp. So it has a Zenith bracelet they used on it. And so this is a wonderful watch. But what I'm really wearing today is in honor of the Olympics in Paris in a way. This is the 1964 Seiko Olympic timer.
Oh, cool.
It's a mono pusher. I'll blow back a little bit more maybe. It's a mono pusher chronograph. So it's only got the sweep hand. And then on the back of these, the problem is to find one that has the Olympic symbol in good shape, and you can you probably can't even see it with the camera. But it barely.
The 5 rings.
No, it has a torch with an Olympic flame.
Right. Okay.
And I can see it if I hold it at this angle. The problem is most of these, for some reason, they're worn down. When you find one with a really good case back, it's really hard to get because they're very desirable. But yeah, so I think closing day of the Olympic Games, I put on my Olympic watch. It's one of the few watches I own that's older than I am. So
yeah, I've gone off the Olympic Games since Australia were robbed for that, the medal for their breakdancing. Okay, so I am wearing Unimatic, the new Unimatic tool watch. So my first from the Italian brand Unimatic. This is a quartz, pretty good. I've just uploaded the review on the channel also just reviewed the new Zelos watch, the little GMT number, which was really cool.
How do you find Unimatic? I really like them. I really like their simple, minimalist designs.
Yeah, I do.
Numberless bezels and things like
Yeah,
that.
I really like them, but you know why I've never bought one before?
There's no date.
Yeah,
No,
they don't put the date on him. So, and yeah, you know, so I held out until they came to their senses and finally put the date on one. So, there you go. Cool. Well, let's see who's in the chat before we dive into our subject. Kevin, thanks for joining.
Kevin.
Junior, thanks for joining. Brassic Time. Bill K. Chris J, thank you for joining. Paul from says hello from Dallas. I was in Dallas a few weeks ago, and I was in San Antonio last week before last. It was really hot. And that's you, Thomas. Yeah. Mark, nice to see you. Thanks for joining. Okay, so the topic today is we're going to talk about vintage reissues, but let's start with the Hodinkee re-release of the Carrera Seafarer. And if anybody's not familiar with this watch, it's actually a very famous watch that was made by Hoyer, but for the American clothing brand, although it wasn't a clothing brand at the time. It did do clothing, but it was like an outdoor sportsman shop, Abercrombie and Fitch, which we now know is the mall clothing brand. But at one time they were
over the years, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Todd, do you remember it when it was? I'm not calling you out for.
You're not calling me out because I'm old. No,
but do you? But because I feel like Abercrombie's. Did they go away and come back, or were they?
So when I was a boy, but I mean, growing up, it was LL Bean, which is still fantastic. Company. In fact, I have 2 LL Bean watches that are co-branded with Hamilton. They're vintage, and Abercrombie and Fitch, and I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. I don't know if they got reborn, but they got reborn into something that's nothing like it used to be, unfortunately. So, and these Abercrombie and I can't say Fitch watches that were Hoyer are super expensive, super collectible.
Really?
Yeah, they are because Hoyer made. We've discussed this on the channel, haven't we? Hoyer they couldn't sell in the US. It was just something they couldn't sell in the US, so they could sell the movements.
That's back when, because a long time ago, in order to protect the American watch industry, Congress passed legislation that taxed different parts of the watch, depending on its nature. So the more jewels you had, the more you had to pay, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that there are clever ways the Swiss watch industry got around, trying to minimize that embargo or whatever it is. Of course, most of the U.S. companies got bought and sent to Switzerland anyway. Maybe that was part of it. And a lot of the U.S. companies didn't survive. Very few did. So like Timex, those sorts of things. But yeah, that's probably part of why they did that. Yeah.
Yeah, so they would appear in Abercrombie and Fitch watches, the Sears brand, Sears and Roebuck's brand Tradition, and I think there was a Sears and Roebuck actual brand, wasn't there?
So I have a Tradition watch in front of me. Again, because things are going to go to the bank here shortly, but this is I've been collecting Tradition watches that are done in the style of the Seiko 6139. And this is actually a Valjoux 7750 powered Sears Tradition watch. And it looks like a blue Pogue.
Yeah.
But and it runs fantastic. And so they did it with Hamilton. Sears partnered with Hamilton. They partnered with Hoyer. And they also evidently I have another one that's from Lejour that's in a Sears case. So it's kind of interesting how all this kind of worked out back then.
Yeah, Sarah, have you ever seen any of these at auction? The Hoyer, either this one or the Hoyer sort of movement watches that weren't branded as Hoyer?
I don't think so. I don't know whether that is just because where I'm based. So unfortunately, no. And I might have had a valuation request once for one a while ago, but it didn't come in, which is disappointing because obviously that's when you go deep into learning about these things, is when they're put in front of you. We don't generally have time to read around things, you know, unless we do it in our own time otherwise. But no, sadly, haven't actually dealt with one.
Yeah, so I think these are they are quite rare now, aren't they? I mean, this one's $20,000 and it looks like it's in very poor condition.
Yeah, that's a little bit. That ask is a little bit too much, but that shows you how valuable they are
around the edges.
Yeah.
So Hodinkee, they have had. I think Tag have had a go at this before because I think this one was it's a re-release of the Skipper, but it had some sort of nods to it.
I absolutely loved the Skipper. I thought it was one of the best collaborations. But Orange Hand is pointing out that the Hodinkee Seafarer is one of the best collaborations they've done in years, and it's telling that it hasn't sold out. So I mean, I absolutely love the Skipper, but I'm not too keen on this Seafarer. I mean, I think the subdials are a little bit. Well, the left subdial, the 9 o'clock subdial, is a little bit patchy. It's a bit too patchy for me.
Yeah. Actually, Paul's saying that Filson made cool watches too. I thought Shinola had re-released Filson, but obviously they were a legacy brand as well. I imagine Filson was like a newer brand that Shinola brought back to life, or the founders of Shinola. Yeah. Okay. So they've re-released it. It's in a 42mm size, so it is larger than the glass box ones that they've recently been doing. But this is, if we could just skip back, it does have that fateful element of the 2 subdials, doesn't it? There's a clear nod to it there. But what does everyone think? Todd, what do you think?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of this in general. I like when reissues are done. If you're going to do a reissue or a reimagining that's really close to what the original was like, I like how they've done that. I have a good example here. Again, I came armed to bear. So on the right, let me make sure I do it right. Yeah, the one with the kind of blue band, the Bulova. This is the Bulova Stars and Stripes. It's the Chronograph C remake. And so the one with the blue strap is the Bulova Precisionist quartz movement. And you can see the small second hand, or the timekeeping second on the 6 o'clock. You can see it. It goes every half second it clicks. The one here is the original from 1970. They only made it 1 year. And it uses a Valjoux hand wind movement. But you can see, it has the little rocket hands, the same as the original there. The only problem they did is they made it monstrous. It's too big. It's like 44. It's huge. And I can't really wear it. Even though it's lugless, like the original, I can't really wear it. It's just a hockey puck. But they did a fantastic job, I think, in terms of they almost like recreated it with the quartz movement. I think they did a great job. I think they did a great job with this one too. It's a little expensive in my book. That may be part of it. And what's the lug to lug on that? So if it's a 42 and it looks like it has those really broad lugs on it, if that's over 50, then that's a tough watch to wear for most people.
It doesn't say, does it? I bet you it's more like a 47 because the lugs do look
47 would be all right.
Shorter.
Yeah, but it depends on how far those lugs extend.
Yeah, somebody mentioned about it not selling out. I'm actually quite surprised.
Yeah, I am surprised too. It's $8,000, but it's a very nice watch.
Because they recently sold the Porsche one,
didn't they? That sold out straight away. Yeah, I mean, as I say, this has vibes of the Skipper, and I think that the dials are really nice. And something about that 9 o'clock one is a bit over much for me. Be interesting to get Sarah's take on it. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just going to say, I mean, I'm obsessed by a Hoyer like pre-tag, and like so when they come in and I get to see them, like that's the most exciting thing for me.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm going to automatically dislike a reissue because it isn't an old one, but I'm always sort of arguing with myself as to whether I would like it if it was closer to the original or like it if it was more modern.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the colors on the subdials there, and it's just, I'm not sure that they work for me. But having said that, the ones on the Skipper, like they were just very aesthetically pleasing. So sorry, I mean, that's quite basic to just talk about color, but there's something about those that works a little bit better for me, even though you've got contrast there with the red and the green. I do wonder about the price, whether that is an issue, right? Because that one's what, 5,000-ish.
Well, this is a pre-owned, isn't it? Because these were about $7,000, I think, when they came out.
Oh, right. Okay, were they? Right. Well, yeah. So I mean, I guess that is interesting if they haven't sold out then. I mean, if it's not a massive leap up from the last one, then I'm not, it's not a cop out, but I haven't seen either in person, obviously. So I would worry about the lug to lug on my wrist though, right? Because there are a lot of watches that I simply are just too big. And it isn't just it's not a gender thing at all for me, because I do mostly wear gents, traditionally described as gents watches. But if it's just too big, then I just can't even, I can't sort of almost appreciate them. But I like it, but definitely prefer that Skipper.
Yeah, this Skipper is smaller. This is 39 millimeters, but it
that's
looks
perfect.
Yeah,
Yes.
it looks 39 as well. So I think actually this would be a good. There you go. Watch finder $5,000 there. So how often do you see Hoyas come into Bonhams?
Not as much as I would like to, but that's not a negative thing. It's just, I think, in terms of vintage watches, what we see most regularly, obviously, is sort of Rolex. We see a lot of Patek. We see a really good variety. I've taken in, we've got a Skipper era, if I'm going to I always mix that one up. And I was really excited about that. So that'll be coming up shortly. But yeah, not that often. And I think they just maybe aren't in such high circulation, unfortunately. So yeah.
So
I bet you see more collaborations with Tiffany & Co. and Van Cleef & Arpels, don't you? More collaborations with those than people like Kadinky.
Yeah. All right. I mean, all right, as in collaboration. I mean, we don't, in terms of newer watches, if that's what you're meaning. Do you mean that we don't see many?
I mean old watches as well.
Old vintage Tiffany Pateks and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. I got you. So in terms of collaborations, yeah. Oh, we've seen some really amazing things recently. I think we've had a couple of Patek, like double signed Tiffany, that sort of thing. And I mean, obviously, they sell themselves. You have to be careful that both signatures are original, for one reason or another. And that's a lot of obviously what we do. We turn away an awful lot of things when we can't be 100% sure. You'd be surprised.
Really?
Because we don't, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it morally, obviously, if you've got any doubts, but it's not obviously worth it financially and time-wise. So you need to be 100% behind what you're putting up for sale. And it's hard sometimes. It is hard. We saw a clock recently, and we don't deal with clocks, but there's a bit of a crossover sometimes, depending on the brand. So if it's Cartier, sometimes we'll get a look at it, and sometimes a jewellery person will look at it as well. And we felt we'd seen it before without a signature. And so you just can't take it. It doesn't matter how perfect it is otherwise. So that's a difficult thing with the double signature, because it obviously can multiply the value so massively. You really, really just have to be careful. But yeah, it's exciting when you get an inquiry like that and the vendor doesn't know the difference. Do you know? I've got my dad's Rolex. They just see Rolex. They don't see the other words. They've just seen the words. So that's nice. It's always nice to talk to them. Yeah.
I was chatting to a friend who might be watching. Andy, if he's watching, he worked on oil rigs for a long time with deep sea divers, and he was saying that some of them still wear their Comex Rolexes, and I was like, wow, I wouldn't. How would you possibly, if it's still diving with them? And I mean, depending on which one of those, they're worth exponentially more, aren't they? Than just the standard submarine.
How do you feel?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, we have that conversation all the time. So that is a tool. That's what it was made for. That's what it was bought for. So we sit and kind of go, oh my goodness, can't believe you're wearing that. And they're like, but what on earth else would it have been for? So yes, it might be nice for them at the end of his career to sell it, but they don't necessarily take them off and stop wearing them or replace them, because they most of the time have been servicing them, that kind of thing. So it's just the different perspectives. They're so valuable to them as a piece of equipment, but they're so valuable to us historically and obviously financially as well. So yeah.
He was saying that some of the divers have got wise to it, so they were keeping the dive logs as well with the watches. So when they
like that.
So how would you go about, like, the double scientificity, for example? How would you go about authenticating it? Do you have to go back to the original catalogs, or?
We look for precedent for a start, so we'll look for that reference with the dual signature. Ideally, obviously, if there's an extract or any form of paperwork, I suppose that's obvious, but that's what we're looking for initially. We'll have the longest conversation with the vendor if we can, because we find that the more information about provenance and so on you can get in that initial conversation, the better. It's very hard to get that flow of memory, if that makes sense, because for them, they might have just been buying a watch, or their dad might have mentioned that they bought this watch. But if you have a conversation with them and you go with them, kind of chat for half an hour over a coffee or whatever like that, you'll get a much more of a story and it starts to come back to them. So that kind of provenance, any paperwork. We can speak to some of the brands. Obviously, the department's been going for decades, so we can ask them. But yeah, we're looking for precedent. We're looking for as well, does the signature look right? Because unless they've refinished and repainted and done all of it at the same time, if it's just been put over something, under magnification, it's going to come up. And ultimately, second, third, and like fourth opinions. That's what I'm constantly saying, is the more people you can ask an opinion for or of, then the better. So yeah, and as I said, we just turn them away in the nicest possible way. Nobody's being accused of anything, but if we're not 100% happy, every single one of us, then obviously we can't. There's no point. So
that's tough.
Really interesting.
Is the auction? Are you seeing any sort of downturn in the auction market? I mean, the general used pre-owned watches are. I mean, Hodink's obviously taken a huge hit. They're backing out of it, allegedly.
Yeah.
And there's a few other brands. Are you seeing that on the auction side, or is it that the clientele are still?
There was such an upwards trajectory, right? So I started doing this 13 years ago. And I would say the last 5 to 10 years, obviously, that kind of graph's just gone massively upwards. And then you had that bubble that was COVID. So yeah, we've noticed the same as everyone else. So new and neo-vintage or grey market, that kind of burst and came down. So auctions followed that. Most of the things that we see are maybe 10 years old or 5 years old and older. The best vintage things, if you talk about the whole antiques market, you'd say the same. The best stuff never really struggled, and it continues to rise. So if you get it right and it's as original as it possibly could be, and it has its papers and dive logs, if it's like a Comex, those things haven't wobbled. What we did find for a little while, and we're more careful with valuing, is the vintage pieces that are kind of maybe low to medium. So things that are maybe sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 up to £15,000. Those ones aren't so easy to sell because people are more educated and they're picky. So originality is even more important there. So something that was maybe 8 to 12 might be 6 to 8. And that's just an adjustment. And that's just because people, as I say, have educated themselves, and that's a great thing. And they'll question things more. And also they're covering more platforms and more ways of buying. So they look and they'll say that's rare, but I might be able to get a better one. Those hands don't look as original or whatever, or that doesn't look quite right, or I'll move on. So that's the only adjustment. But I don't. That's maybe a market trend, but I like to think of it as sort of almost like a community thing. That's like a knowledge building thing.
It's right in your sweet spot, this, Todd, isn't it? Because that's you look for vintage Seiko, don't you, at auction and other sort of interesting vintage.
Right. So yeah, just to give you a couple examples of recent ones. So here's one I got from Bonhams a while ago for Sarah. I brought it out when I heard Sarah was coming on. So this is a Seiko. This is all original Seiko rally timer.
That's cool.
Isn't this a cool one? This is done by Seiko separated into two companies, Donnie and Suwa. And this is the Donnie chronographs. They came out a little bit after the the Pogues, the 6139s and stuff. But yeah, it's a rally timer. It's a flyback design. It's really pretty cool. But here's an example too. I'm curious of what Sarah would think in terms of this coming in. I guess if you identify it, it's fine. So this is a Omega Seamaster soccer timer I bought from an auction not long ago. And
Yes.
if I can get I love the white dial. There we go. I got the reflections down. Now this has an Omega service dial on it. In other words, what you probably can't quite see, you can see the Omega symbol and Omega underneath. If it's the original dial, it says Seamaster underneath it. This is a service dial. This looks like it came to auction right after it was redone because the lines on it, if I can get them to look at that line, I mean, they're perfect. The brushing has just been redone. If I can get it to show up right on top, the radial brushing is perfect. So, and it runs really well. So it seems that this was a service from Omega. And so when I bought this, it was not advertised that this was a service dial. It wasn't your auction, of course. It was a different auction house. But would you be careful in terms of like the type of scrutiny you're describing? And I only knew about it because I had to research it. And I said, oh, that's a service dial, but it's a valid service dial from Omega. It has the right Omega crown. It has all that stuff that you want. But what's interesting is it didn't go up very high compared to where you would pay for, let's say, one that had the original dial. And I bought it because it ended up coming in at a very reasonable cost, and I ended up winning it. But how would you handle that sort of situation? Would you take the watch and then would you advertise it as a service dial in this case, what have you? How would you deal with that, do you think?
Yeah. So what we're looking for is obviously for everything to match up. And often we'll put that in the condition report.
Okay.
So that's a massive bit of advice. If you're going to buy at auction, read the condition report. If there isn't one there, ask for one. And if they can't give you one, it's kind of on you. If you buy it, it's still binding, but we wouldn't do that. We provide the condition reports for everything before the sale goes live. So we wouldn't generally put that into a description, but yeah, it would go because it's such a major thing. So if a dial's been refinished, repainted, whatever, we will put that into the condition report. To a point, it's subjective unless, exactly how we would describe it. But if it was something like that, with like a whole dial, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And you have the expertise in-house to be able to do that.
And if we don't, we've got like lots of people that act and consult for us if there are brands that we aren't as familiar with. But something that actually bothers me and always has is that like Seiko often doesn't like obviously you're interested in Seiko doesn't often reach our threshold. And I always think that's a shame because I'm then not building my knowledge of Seiko. And so that's kind of frustrating. So we always have to kind of turn that away. So if we did have something like, like that, we could ask someone that does know, because you build up these networks, and obviously things like Instagram are great for finding the right people. But when it comes to that Omega, I started with Bonhams last September, and I always remember the first sale that we had. They brought the upcoming watches on a kind of traveling thing, and they came up to Edinburgh, which is the office that I would go to as my local office. And there was one of those there, and I had never seen one in person before. And it just always struck me how much I liked it, how unusual it was, and how these kind of tool watches, how narrow you can get. And so, yeah, that was nice to see that as well.
Yeah, I like the very specific. Sometimes if I can get a hold of them, like football timers. Somebody pointed out, it's a football timer.
Yeah, it should be good. Yeah.
They've made them for basketball. They've made them for Seiko's made a lot of them too that are really interesting. The regatta timers are done that way for a specific reason. Know when to start. I have a regatta timer here somewhere.
Is that's Seafarers? That's a regatta timer, isn't it? On the side, or is it?
Yes, I think it is.
Yeah.
Only thing that troubles me about the Seafarer is the pushers. I wouldn't use the pushers underwater. I don't get diving chronographs. I don't get the diving chronograph genre. It's interesting comment by Orange Hand. He says real vintage beats 1-to-1 reissues every day of the week. but he does like seeing things like the Seafarer, where brands riff off old designs and updates. I was just going to ask Sarah, have you ever had any reissues into Bonhams, such as the Vacheron 222 or the Omega Trilogy 57 box set or things like that, or any reissue watches
I'm
actually
racking
come
my
in?
brains. Nothing's leaping to mind that recent. No, I don't think so. Bearing in mind, I'm using it as an excuse I haven't been there that long.
Sure.
I'll probably go and check the sale history right after since it's covered. I know. Right. Oh, I personally haven't catalogued one. That's
there
you go. Yeah,
that's
it's
fine.
yeah.
No worries.
Yeah, I have to say at work. This is my own technical opinion. I have to say, sometimes I have to say that at work.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Todd, or maybe Sarah, you know this. Is there ever a watch where the service dial is more valuable? The one with the service dial is more valuable than one with a normal dial.
I've never seen that.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't
it
seen
always
that.
affects the dial. It always affects the
Yeah,
value.
originality with watches, vintage watches is supreme. But of course, there's exceptions where they can still be very desirable, like my football timer. Sorry, my football timer is, but the price was, oh gosh, half what it would have been probably if it was the original dial, which I'm fine with because this. So here's I told you I have like a lot of watches. I mean, here's a 1957 reissue Omega Speedmaster, right? With the coaxial movement. There we go. Yeah. So the broad hands. Again, this is, I think, a really excellent reissue. I mean, Omega has 10 billion different versions of the Speedmaster, and that's the critique, right? But and it's got it's on a man cave leather strap. Got to say hello to the custom one he did for me, and it's got the Omega, coaxial movement in it. It's great, great piece. Another auction find that I got. That looked like it had been dunked in a pigsty, and so it was awful. It was like, ugh. But I cleaned it up, and I didn't even have to decase the movement. I cleaned it up, and it came out fantastic. But yeah, I think that's another case where it was a really, really good reissue. I'm surprised you haven't seen those come around, Sarah. I think they sold a fair amount of these, but But yeah, I don't know. I don't know about Orange Hands. I mean, real vintage is great. I mean, that's kind of what I'm into, but I have some modern ones too. Like I know. See, I prepared for this show. Here's one of my favorite brands.
I've got one watch on my desk.
Carl F.
Oh,
Bucherer.
yeah, the Hamilton.
There's a Carl F. Bucherer Monero it's not a flyback. It's a Monero Heritage. So it's a big date Panda chronograph. Yeah. It uses an ETA movement with a Dupuis Dupois module on top of it. Fantastic watch. I bought this several years ago from Dean at Little Switzerland. But the original Moneros, this is a remake almost. Again, it's a reissue of the original Monero from Carl F. Bucherer. But I would never wear the original. It's going to be fragile. It's going to be. I mean, I would if I owned one and found one, but I would never. I'll wear this, anywhere. It's a go anywhere. Whoops, sorry. Bang it. I mean, it's going to be good. If I had an original one, no. Original Rolex, going back to the 60s, 50s. Those are very delicate compared to the modern ones, right? I wouldn't be. I mean, so Orange Hand has a good point. But if I'm going to wear something a lot, my Movado Zenith, am I going to wear that a lot? Well, maybe some. I mean, it's in good shape. But how much does it cost to fix that if something goes wrong to the El Primero, the original El Primero? So what are you going to ask? I'm sorry, Thomas.
So I was just going to say, Todd, you got all these vintage watches and you're a big Seiko head. I was going to say, would you wear any revival Seiko watches, such as the Willard, the 62 Mass, the new Seiko Pogue Revival, the solar-powered one? Would you buy any of those?
So because I like the vintage so much, like I have a bunch. So this is like the one Sam has. He had the same. I had my Restore send him one. This is a blue Pogue, 6139.
Yeah.
From 1976. It's been restored. These you can wear. I don't have a problem wearing my vintage Seiko's chronographs because they're built like Rolex in a way. They don't break.
Right.
You can bang them around. They're simple column wheel, very sophisticated movement with a clutch. So So to answer your question, the reason I said that is because I would wear a new Willard. The vintage 6105s that comes from are very expensive, in good shape.
Yeah.
Right. They're highly collectible. Even though if you have a good one of those, yeah. But if you're going to really wear like a dive watch, I think maybe Sarah would agree with this too. I'm not, and it gets back to the Comex thing. I would never dive or really use a vintage dive watch diving. You're never going to get the water resistance that you really need from a vintage watch. Things change. Materials, even if you have it rebuilt and all that, I just don't trust it. So, yeah, I love the 62 Moss reissue. They did a fantastic job. The new Seiko Pogue, the solar one, I think it's great. Now see where I says Seiko Todd right there, right? So when you go on the Seiko forums where the non-normies are, right, the crazy people, yeah, that's a beautiful watch. It's a great price. I think it's great, but if you ask the Seiko heads, they'll say, no, that's not, what it should be, blah, blah, blah. It shouldn't be, and I don't dig it. I'm not into that scene so much. Seiko enthusiasts can be awful. I mean, really, we can be awful.
Yeah.
It's
the forum heads can be
the forum heads, right? I mean, they'll say that's not right.
Yeah,
I
can imagine.
But I think Seiko did a fantastic job. It's a great watch. I'd wear that anywhere.
Yeah. So I suppose, Sarah, like the forums are pretty tricky to get comps from or opinions on because there's just so many different opinions.
Yeah, I think I find that they are the best place to go when I can't find the information somewhere else, or if I've got something really, really that feels random and I'm thinking this probably isn't right. I might find a conversation for somebody saying the same sort of thing, and then you can find a trail. So it can kind of be an in. But I've not used them so much really because our first kind of rule is precedent auction wise, and then can we find it retail? So we would kind of go down that route. But yeah, as I say, I found answers about my own like obscure vintage watches by looking at forums, because they are the only place where people seem to be sharing any knowledge on them.
Yeah, that makes sense. The Omega forums are good. Excuse me. I'll reach back here. Hold on again.
Yeah, we're doing a vintage reissue show, and it turned into Todd interviewing as Bonham's.
I've got another Bonham's watch too, Sarah. I can show it to you. That's perfectly legit. Perfect. Good. So this is this is another one I got at auction recently. Let's see if I can show it. And I'm gonna have to go to Omega 4 to get the Omega papers on it to see if it's legit. So it's really big. It's like a 42. It's a monopusher chronograph. Omega hasn't made a monopusher chronograph in ages, like from the 30s or 40s. And I'm like, that had the monopusher. That had the monopusher in the crown, like this one. Here's the back of it.
Right.
It's in the crown. Here's the back of it. And what does that look like? It's a pocket watch movement.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's fairly sophisticated too. The case back, nope, just to show this, is a real Omega case back. Right. And then on the outside, it's in Czech. There's a Czech in Czechoslovakia or Czech language that says administration property of the military. And so when the auction house, not Bottoms, that I bought this from, advertised it, they advertised it as what it says in here in Czech, which is I'm gonna kill it. Maciek Wolnyski Surprisey or something like that, right? And so what the Omega forums think this is, because I posted it to them after I bought it for a very reasonable price, like $500, which is crazy, right? And it runs. And they said, "Oh, it's a put-together watch." Somebody.
Marriage watch.
Yeah. Marriage watch. Thank you, a marriage watch. Yeah. And it may or may not be, but it's really interesting that it's put together perfectly. So if they marriage watched it, they found a case that's perfect. It has an Omega case back that's a legit Omega case back. It has the right hands. It may be a redial of some sort. I don't know. I'm going to go try to find out. But the way this was advertised was just as this funky Czechoslovakian thing on the back. The auction house barely said anything about it because I don't think they knew what to do with it. Again, this is another one that Sarah, that you probably would reject because if there is providence, then I'm the luckiest guy in the world. If Omega comes back and said, yeah, we made 100 of these for the Czech military, guess what? You've got a very valuable watch. But
yeah.
If not, then it's what it is, and that's fine. But I guess, Sarah, you wouldn't probably have entertained this thing.
Yeah, and someone that's so valuable to us is the global head of watches, Jonathan Darracott. So he's a trained watchmaker. That's what he started doing. And that's quite unusual in the auction world, as far as I can make out, because broadly what we do is quite commercial. So we need to understand pricing, we need to understand authenticating and so on. But most of us aren't technically minded so much that way. And he also ran Juvinia, if that's how you pronounce it, for a while over in Switzerland. So he's got a lot of different perspectives, but he's just handled literally thousands of watches, and he's got the most critical eye. And yeah, so he's great for that. He can spot something in a minute that just does not look right, so a marriage will immediately be obviously a marriage for him, Franken watches, just that kind of thing. He's great for that. So yeah, and it is sad, I suppose, because it's a curiosity. But even if you're open, you say that might be that might be that. We obviously can't do that because it just doesn't look right. But it does mean, you're turning away something that is a great curiosity, unfortunately. But it has to be
right, and that's what this is.
If people are sending you watches in, there must be a cost for you to do this research, is there? Even if you turn them away, or no?
Okay,
no. And I think sometimes I always think we're not getting that across. If we say, do you want to pop in for an appointment, like we literally mean that, and we could spend hours with the person. They can bring us, somebody came in with 50 watches or something to the London office the other day. Really? And my colleague said, look what I've got. Said we've got a group sort of WhatsApp chat, so we know what's going on, because we're all over the place. Obviously I'm up here, and the chap left 4 of them, and that's not, yes, it would have been nice to have all 50, but that's just part of it. And we don't obviously charge for that time. The only reason we would charge for the time if they weren't being sold would be if you needed a document or something like that for insurance. But otherwise, it's on us. It's part of our sales pitch. We would like these things in, so we need to be able to tell you what it's worth and why. And so however long it takes us to do that, that's the good bit of the job. So yeah,
that is interesting. I would assume that there would be a cost to, evaluating a watch, because the same like Chrono 24 online, these, which isn't really an online auction, but Chrono 24, there's a cost to it, even if it doesn't sell, or if you sell it elsewhere, you still you still have to pay. So I wouldn't have questioned there being a valuation fee. So that's pretty interesting.
That's pretty good, yeah, especially that many. I'm sure you'll get like estate collections, and somebody will bring in their father's collection, and you'll do a quick evaluation and figure out if it's worth pursuing or not.
Yeah, and we have a good online inquiry sort of system as well, and we make sure we reply to everybody, obviously, because even if the one they're showing you might not be at the threshold, then they might have 10 more. You never know how that works. So there's loads of different ways of doing it, and you just you have to be available, and you have to be quick, because it's so competitive, right? You've just said you go to Chrono 24, you can go to a million other places. And a traditional physical auction house, bricks and mortar, might not be the first place that people would necessarily think to go. So yeah, we have to be there, available, free of charge for valuing them by email or verbally. So it's just a big part of it, and it's the best bit.
Yeah, that makes it a very good proposition, doesn't it? Because there's always a risk, isn't there? I know certain people, there's even a risk of selling on Chrono 24, even though they have that escrow. Same with the eBay. I suppose that might be another question. I don't know if you've got an opinion on the eBay authentication service at all. Have you experienced it at all?
I know a couple of people that have sold through it, but I don't know of anyone that's bought through it. So yeah, I've not heard any criticism. I've not used it, so I can't say. But certainly as an idea, it sounds excellent, because I'm old enough to remember when eBay arrived. And I think the impression of it and the feel that it gives people is much more secure and happy now than it was then. And that, I think, for watch people, the authentication service must be a massive part of that confidence now that we have, surely.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
good
I-
for sellers.
I-
I've sold 3 watches. through it.
Yeah, I get the feeling that they don't open the watches. They just look at the watches on the eBay authentication service.
Yeah, they don't
I
open
get
it
correct.
to look at the movement, I don't think.
Okay.
What they do is they make sure that the watch that was being advertised is the watch being shipped.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that what they're looking at is they're trying to make sure, like for above $2,000, right? So let's say my Omega Seamaster, right? It was advertised, boom, they sell it, and you look at it. Yep, that's exactly what you're not trying to like switcheroo on somebody.
Right.
And then because they had a lot of problems with that, people trying to take advantage of sellers saying, "Hey, you didn't ship me the right watch," and so they make sure it is. And so then they have photographic evidence that is this watch. Now, if that watch is a fake, they don't know, right?
Yeah.
And so that part is still.
I think they
an
do
issue.
have some. I think they do an authentication. I do think they do an authentication check because they guarantee
really?
that it is authentic.
They do.
I don't know how they do it because it does go through there very fast. Like if somebody has
I don't know how
hands
you
on
do
it,
it.
I would say for minutes, not hours.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
the good thing about selling through there, not that this is eBay aren't a sponsor, but they're welcome to sponsor the channel if they like. They have in the past. They also handle the return. So if you send it, they make sure it's the watch that you sold. And if the buyer returns it, I've never had that happen yet because I do such good deals on eBay. They will authenticate that it's the watch that you sent. So I think that's something that they don't talk about. But I think actually that's a big perk if you're a seller on eBay because they'll authenticate it coming back as well.
Coming back, I see what you're saying. So somebody doesn't just do the switcheroo on the back end, but like the fakes are so like going back to what you just said, Sam. Let's talk to Sarah a little bit more about this. So the prevalence of the super fakes, which is one reason why I'm not a vintage Rolex guy, other than the cost, of course, it's crazy. But the super fakes out there are just crazy from what I've seen. How do you like? I understand even Rolex ads won't even handle looking at some like a Submariner and saying, yeah, that's real or not. How do you deal with that at your shop in terms of those sorts of things?
The way, because I've given a few talks on what I do and what I say to somebody, like imagine if someone wasn't into watches at all, is I sort of assume that a new or nearly new watch is fake. And I start with what is it telling me to tell me it's genuine rather than the other way around. I think up here compared to London, we don't see as many. They're not in circulation so much, but in previous jobs, I have seen a few that might have come through the police, that sort of thing. And thankfully, they've not been the best fakes. I've only had one that through the most obscure way, I realized actually this will be a super fake. And that was a moment that's unnerving, but you learn from every one of these situations. But the rest of them, usually once you open them up, they've got big plastic spacers and it might be an automatic movement, but it looks like I made it, usually the boxes are wrong. And I would say though, we get a lot of people with genuine, not a lot, but the odd person with a genuine Rolex who will buy boxes and papers.
Yep.
And say, because they believe that they're offering something better. And that puts you on edge. But as I say, you're going to assume it's not right and then let itself kind of prove itself to be correct. But yeah, boxes and papers. I mean, when you see that for a start, you think, okay. And I did see for a while a few with the same type of papers. So it was obviously like someone was selling quite a lot of them through eBay. But it's the same process as it is for any other watch. You're examining them to the naked eye and then you take out a loop. And then you've got obviously to start with the numbers. The ones that were, the fakes that you would see that weren't that great, they would all have the same serial number, or they would, do you know what I mean? Or the serial number production dates wouldn't match. So like it would be a Kermit, but it shouldn't have been produced during that period of time, that sort of thing. And again, if you're in any doubt, this is what I love now about my job is that I've got a whole department of people to ask. In my last 2 jobs, it was me. So I was asking connections that I had made, and it would feel like you were asking a favor of a kind of, not even a colleague. So yeah, those lots of different opinions. But yeah, as I say, usually they've slipped up on something fairly major.
Okay.
But it's important to just keep on top of the news that comes through and what they're doing now, if that makes sense. So you have to be kept up to date with what they've mastered next.
Wow.
Yeah, because I've had people even send me messages on Instagram asking about they've inherited a watch, and it's obvious.
always that.
Yeah, obviously it's because I imagine I think the super clones are more. I think of the super clones as more of a like recent thing in the last 10 to 15 years. So because the old vintage fakes were all. I mean, I think probably easier to tell than perhaps nowadays. But I know Panerai has a big problem with.
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
Panerai's always had a problem, and I think the super clones are coming into effect over the past 5 years or so, with China getting better and better watchmaking. And
Well, they're making the cases, aren't they? They're making a lot of the
they
legit
are,
cases, aren't they?
yeah.
They're very good manufacturing.
Yeah.
Do you know what's really interesting? What I have seen is quite a few kind of counterfeit Omega watches from the 70s, like ladies ones, which seems a bit random. But I don't think they're not being made recently. They looked vintage. And this was like maybe 10 years ago in another job. And I remember thinking, why would you fake that? But it maybe was like now, if you go on holiday and you in a market or whatever, that was just the trend. So they made what they knew would sell. And I saw a Breitling Navitimer maybe kind of 8 or 9 years ago as well that was fake, but looked to me like it was period correct, but like obviously was a complete fake.
Wow, because that's a hard one to fake, isn't it? The intricacies of the dial and everything.
But it just was not right at all. So there are obviously counterfeiting's been around for ages, right? You come across like vintage, like or antique coins and stuff that aren't right, and they become relics. They could become relics in their own right. But yeah, so it's not just new. It's not just new watches we have to be careful of.
Yeah. Go on, Thomas.
Sorry, Sam. I was just going to say, I'd be interested to hear from the chat what their favourite revival watches are.
There's a few. So Jim, welcome, Jim. I haven't seen you in the channel before, but it says it hasn't sold because it's poorly executed. Reissue just makes the original. They could sell.
I don't know. I thought it was executed. I haven't had one in the flesh, so
yeah.
I thought
and then Orange Hand says a big tell on the service dials, at least modern ones, is the Swiss made versus Swiss made T.
Right. Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, because that's why they did the service dials. You don't reissue a tritium dial, usually speaking, and so that's what happened to mine. Probably it went in for service and they removed the original dial.
I've just seen so many great revivals though recently. I mean, I've seen the Breitling 806 1959. There's the Omega trilogy set, as I said. The Ed White, the Blancpain Barracuda, the new Zenith Defy Diver that came out this year, the Joe Perigo Casquette that Dave's got, the IWC Engineer, the AP Remaster 2, the Tag Skipper, the Tudor P01, the Vacheron 222. There just seems to be a huge swell of reissues. It seems to be the thing of the moment. If you can't come up with an original watch, bring out a reissue. It just seems to be the thing of the moment. Has been for the past 5 years or so. If you can't,
and they're making them like they seem to be making them exact reissues, don't they? I mean that's Seafarer, but I had an example of apparently this Navitimer, this reference that came out, I think
the 806 1959.
Is like exactly the measurements and everything are completely
copy.
And then the
Chopard Alpine Eagle. Sorry, the Chopard Alpine Eagle. That was the reissue of the name's gone out of my head now. What it used to be called, was it San Moritz? Am I making that up?
Oh, really?
I may be making it up.
No, let's have a look.
No,
the Alpine Eagle I love, but I also like the original one that it was. It's not a reissue of it, but it's like it's a
homage
inspired by.
You know, you're right. It was called the Saint Moritz. You're right.
Yeah, because I wrote a bit on that, so I really got into that. And every time I see the San Moritz, and there are hardly any of them. I've never seen one at work, but I really do I think that's a nice one. And I think that the Alpine Eagle is a great thing. And obviously people don't talk about Chopard that much.
Right.
Yeah.
It's eclectic, to say the least. Although I love the Mal Biglia chronographs. I'll want to get one day.
There is a. I don't know which.
Oh, by the way,
whether
Orange
there's
Hands.
any-
Yes, it's an Omega signed movement. I was gonna say it is indeed a real Omega signed movement. So there you go.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, that's
I love this one, the
Yeah.
XPS. The Alpine Eagle XPS, the salmon dial. Absolutely love it. I know someone who's got one, and it's
The
absolutely
dials,
stunning.
Yeah.
Stunning. The striations on the dial,
Yeah.
the way that it comes out from the center, just stunning. Absolutely
Is that a gold
stunning.
watch too? I mean, that's kind of pricey.
Yeah.
No, it's steel.
A lot-
Steel watch.
Okay.
Steel watch with a. Sorry, Sarah.
No,
saying
all I
a
was
lot.
going to say was I was just going to coo over it more. I was just going to say the original one. A lot of them are kind of bicolor, and I just think a 2-color watch is a great thing. But
this one here.
look at, I mean, it's really, really quite odd looking,
Yeah,
but it's just great.
Yeah, I saw somebody wearing an Alpine Eagle I was in Atlanta Airport a few weeks ago. I was going to ask him about it, but it's a bit odd. It's not like an obvious watch that you would. But it looked awesome. He was just in like a businessman in a suit and stuff. But
I
it
do
was,
think that the Alpine Eagle is actually. I never say this. I probably would choose that newer version over that original Samoritz.
Yeah,
just because I think there's something. It's reconciled some of the things that are just a little bit too eccentric, but that's an example of an inspiration within a brand that isn't just a copy and isn't just a way we tweak the colors to make them work for today. It just seems like a genuine reworking of something.
Yeah, it's like this thing about people using. I think people use homage wrong, like 90% of the time in the watch world. That is a true homage. It's paying honor to a previous design they did.
Yeah.
They're homaging one of their own brands, but it's not a copy. It's paying respects to the design.
Yeah.
So Karuka says my 1944 Vacheron still has an intact radium numerals. That's an interesting one. She said, do you get this with watches with radium coming in on the dials at all?
Yeah.
And do you have to handle them in a special way, or do you don't open them, or how do you?
I spoke to Jonathan about this, my boss, because as I said before, in my previous jobs, it was always just me, and essentially learning as I went and trying to make this network up and books and Google and everything. And I catalogued the whole sale of military watches from single owner without gloves on, without a mask. And they were, I mean, I opened some of them, and looking back, sometimes I'm like, well, it's done now. And I mentioned this to Jonathan and he went, oh, it's fine. You're not there manufacturing them. He's like, you weren't like licking them and painting on the numbers, the numerals. Yeah. And he put my mind at rest. So I would probably personally now, I might wear gloves. But then because of the way that my job works, I often send the watches down to my colleagues and they'll open them anyway. But yeah, we see a lot of things because we had the GMT Master with the Bakelite bezel in recently.
Oh, yeah.
And if you put a Geiger counter on them, I mean, obviously it's as far as I understand it, I think they're radioactive. So yeah, we see them a lot because obviously that's what we deal with, and it's a good thing mostly, and not the radiation, but the originality side of it.
Yeah. My grandfather, my dad inherited a watch from my grandfather, and I had to tell him it was. He'd found it, and it had gone brown. I was like, yeah, it's definitely radium. I wouldn't. He was panicking about it, but I wasn't. But I know Watch Chris who sent me this T-shirt. And big shout out to Watch Chris. He's got a 50 fathoms that he apparently you don't keep it in a sealed box. That's the thing. I forget which way around it is, but you would think, I'll keep it in a sealed box. But I think actually you're not supposed to do that.
I don't know.
That might be fake news. Anybody?
Let's aerate.
My word for it. Yeah. Handle at your own risk. Well, that's been awesome. Let's see if we've got any final comments coming on. So Paul Sanchez says the Movado Alta Super Sub Chrono is a great reissue watch. Let's have a look.
I don't know if I've seen that one, huh?
I can't.
Huh.
Another one that we haven't mentioned is the El Primero. When was that reissued? Was that 2019?
19,
For the
19, yeah.
for the anniversary of the
For the anniversary.
Love that.
19, from 1969, I think it was.
Yeah. I mean, I'd obviously
Yeah.
love one of the original ones, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's a
Oh,
favourite.
here.
Yeah, I've got a.
Yeah.
Here's the rainbow chronograph. El Primero, Zenith. You know that.
That's
It's,
so
I
nice.
guess it's 90s though. I thought so. This was from the 90s.
Maybe there was another one before. I
Yeah.
wasn't aware of it.
Yeah.
I
it's
mean,
a
the
wonderful watch.
same year that the El Primero came out, they brought out the Diver, which they really re-released this year. That bright orange octagonal
Oh,
diver.
the new diver.
Yeah, is it octagonal? So that's six
Eight
sides.
si-
Eight sides.
Eight
Sorry,
sides. Yeah.
octagonal. The diver, the A3648.
Yeah. I wonder how that.
Bright orange.
Yeah, I'll let me pull it up here so everyone can see what you're talking about. Oh, yeah, this one. I don't know who this King Jewelers are, but this one.
Yes.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, those are excellent. I like
Yeah,
those a
8
lot.
sides. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how those sold because they're quirky, aren't they? I don't know if
They
they're
are.
Yeah.
They're small
wonder.
as well. 37 mil.
Yeah,
So
they
it
look
is
small,
small.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the question is how many of them are on Chrono 24? I don't know.
Oh
Maybe,
yeah, actually that would be a good shot. Let's do that one last search. The Zenith Defy Revival it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, there is quite a few. Oh no, it's two. There's two.
Oh, okay. Or Joma Shop, if Joma Shop is hawking.
Yeah. Cool.
Oh, Mark Ikean is waiting patiently for Seiko to reissue the Bullhead Seiko sword. So
Yep, I have two original bullheads from the 70s. Yes, I don't know. Sometimes Seiko again, they do a good job, and other times they really miss the mark. They don't.
Citizen have recently reissued one, haven't they, or brought one out, which is I think it's called a Tsuo. I can't remember the name. Some long Japanese name. Citizen, yeah. But it's a discombobulating dial. It's just too busy.
Yeah, I reviewed the gold one on the channel.
Yeah. I think Dave did a great job with Detroit Mint on his version. Here's an original. I just happen to have it again up here. Here's an original.
Love it. Love it.
Isn't that nice? It's waiting to go to the restore because it's not running right, and it's got its original Citizen bracelet on it, which is hard to find. I can't get it to come in, but anyhow, there it is down there. But yeah, I'm full of all sorts of toys today.
Awesome.
Yeah,
cool.
Well, a great little expo from you, Todd. It's been great.
Yeah, thanks for that, and thanks Sarah for joining us. Thanks everyone in the comments for all of your comments. I'll end the stream, but if everybody just stays in the back room on our side. Thanks everyone for watching.
Take care, everyone. See you next time.